Ladies and jelly spoons, it's wonderful to wait a what? I think I was supposed to say gentlemen there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to see those smiling faces today. Today we're going to be drawing a lighthouse, and we're actually going to do a little more than the one you see here on the screen now. This one is just black and white. And if you want to stop there, that's fine. We are going to talk about the inking techniques here, but we're also going to be adding color to ours. Now, if you are using any kind of alcohol-based markers like these Copic sketch markers, or there's lots of different brands for alcohol-based inks, but these, it's very important if you're using these kinds of markers that you consider what type of pen you're using. Now, this right here is a micron size 08. The benefit of using something like this is that it's waterproof archival ink that is not going to be messed up when you color over it with a Copic or alcohol-based marker. Now, with other kinds of pens that you could use Sharpies. Sharpies will work, or the Sharpie pen that's an ultrafine point, or Prismacolor fine liners, or just about any brand of fine liner pens. But you probably don't want to use a ballpoint pen or just a standard, like Flair pen or something like that. So with all that being said, now that we've made our pen selection, we want to start drawing our beach picture with a lighthouse. Now, the first thing is we want to kind of split the paper in thirds, three sections. So, like, imagine there are lines here, and you've got one section on the right, one section in the middle, and a third section on the left. 1, 2, 3. Now, we don't want to draw those lines, we just want to imagine it. And the reason is we don't want the lighthouse to be right in the middle. We want the lighthouse to be off to one side. And so we're going to have lighthouse on one side, but not like all the way touching the side. It's going to be a little in. And then this area is going to be the seascape, and then this area up here is going to be the sky. So with all that being planned out, right over here on the right hand side, not too close. So what I'm going to do is just kind of get my thirds envisioned, and then right here on this point is where I'm going to draw that lighthouse. Now, to start my lighthouse, I'm going to make mostly a rectangle shape. It might be a little bit wider at the base and a little bit narrower at the top. So I guess you could call it a trapezoid, but it's a tall trapezoid like that. Okay, and then up on top of that trapezoid, we're going to make a rectangle. Now this is the main light area of the lighthouse, and it hangs over the base a little bit. Then we'll give it a roof. Let's make a pointy triangle on top. Pretty simple. Let's add some more detail to it. So in this area up here, there's going to have to be a lot of windows that the light will shine out of, really big windows. And so I've got it where there's like one big window across the middle, and then the windows on the sides, you can imagine that those actually wrap around. It's not a smaller window, it's the same size window, it just wraps around to the other side. Then at the bottom, we're going to make the little doorway, the entryway where you go in. So there's going to be like 2 pillars that will hold up a roof. So it's like a covered entryway. And it kind of looks just like a house, square with a triangle on top. But think of these as 2 round cylinder pillars that are like out in front a little bit. And then the door is going to be slightly behind. So we'll draw the door in that space. Alright, so this is a really good start to our lighthouse, but we definitely need more details. The common thing you see on lighthouses are sort of spiraling stripes. So what we're going to do is make curved lines that come down and curve across. And just repeat that pattern all the way. Now at this point we need to overlap, so they're going to be behind this entry area. So it's going to curve down, and when I bump into that roof, I jump over the roof and keep going. And bump into there, jump over it and keep going. There. So now our lighthouse is pretty much done. We are going to come back to it and add some hatching and cross-hatching for shadows. Because when we're using a pen, we can't shade. But we can add shadows with hatching and cross-hatching. Or stipple, whichever works for you. But moving on, before we do that, let's think about what's going to be around this lighthouse. So maybe there's going to be some dirt or rocks, and it's going to be sort of up on a cliff top. So using some very bumpy lines, I'm going to kind of think from the middle of the page here, coming up and overlapping behind the lighthouse, using some bumpy lines. That kind of gives us a feel for where the edge of that cliff is. If we were to walk, we could walk around the lighthouse here, but if we got to this point, we'd be jumping off into the water. Okay, and then we got to think about where there's going to be like a solid cliff face coming down right here. So then maybe I'm going to curve it back in. You might be wondering, huh? What? Curving it back in. Now this whole area inside this shape right here is land that I could walk on. But if I got to the edge here, I would be jumping off and falling down a cliff. So to show that cliff, we would see that cliff right here. I'm going to come to the corner, the edge, the leftmost part here, and I'm going to drop down with a bumpy line. Now it's still kind of maybe does, maybe doesn't look like it's sort of cliffy, but this area here is the part that goes down. It's like the wall of the cliff. Now to show that, this area is going to be darker. We're going to pretend the light is shining in from, well, you know what? We're going to let the lighthouse be the source of light. So the light is going to be shining down from above. And this area here is not going to get very much light. So we're going to go ahead right now, just to make sure we're clear on that. We're going to do some hatching, but notice that my hatching is not straight parallel lines. In order to get that visual feel, the texture, that it looks kind of like rocks or dirt or bumpy, cliff edge, I'm using wavy, bumpy, janky lines. And maybe there's more of that right here under the lip of the cliff, because where the light is shining straight down, the light from the lighthouse is going to shine down on this, and that's going to cast a deep shadow right under here. But then there's going to be some light reflecting up from the water onto the bottom part of it. So this part right up here is going to be the darkest part. So I'm doing more of these janky, dark, hatching, shadowy lines in here. I'm also kind of scribbling those in. And there we go. But then less as we move down. So maybe get a little bit more underneath here, but not much. And then less down here. Okay, so once you've got your lighthouse and the sort of cliff area drawn in now, we're going to move to the background and we're going to see where is the horizon, where the ocean ends, where the farthest away we can see. So we definitely want it to be lower than this cliff edge. So we don't want it to be way up here, a horizon behind the lighthouse. We want it to be a horizon down low, because we're kind of up high looking down at it. So straight across, right there. That's fine. That's perfect. And then, so this is water, this is sky, this is land, this is lighthouse. Now it's time to start adding in extra details. So in the water, we want water texture. On the land, we want dirt, rocks, grass, maybe a path leading to that door. In the sky, we want definitely the light shining out of this lighthouse, but maybe also some clouds, maybe also the moon and stars. I don't know. It depends on, what time of day you want this picture to be. Okay, so in the water, how do I get the water texture? Well, a lot of people will do things like this, or like this, or like this. Yeah. See, that's not what water looks like. Now, maybe if there are really high crashing waves, it would look something like this. But it's usually the waves that we see in the water are much flatter than we give them credit for. Let me check camera, line up. There we go, perfect. So, little, straight, horizontal strokes close to the horizon. As these come down, they're going to be longer strokes, because back here far away, close to the horizon is far away from us. That's very far away from us, so we're seeing very small. The farther away something is, the smaller it looks. So as these get closer to us, closer to the bottom of the page, those wave strokes are going to be slightly longer. And at this point, you can also start to curve them a little bit more. But notice that the farther ones away are much, much tinier and much straighter. And these ones that are closer are going to have much more detail. And this is where I can start doing little wiggles and add lots more of them. More detail, because it's closer up, we're going to see more of those details. Now we want to have some of them overlap underneath the cliff here. If we just leave a big gap here, it's going to look strange. So we're going to have a couple of these little marks that overlap behind there, and same with the edge of the page. Now, I want to be able to get all the way to the edge of my page without making a mess on my table. So it's a good idea to have something under. Now this right here, this is just a it's a cutting board or a cutting mat. I could rotate it to where it actually says cutting mat 4530, like it's some kind of special. It's just a cutting mat. You know, you'd use it with an X-Acto knife to cut papers, but you could use another sheet of paper under, or really anything. This is a nice table. Well, I say it's nice. My great-grandfather made this table a long, long time ago, and I don't want to mess it up, so I'm going to use this mat. And that way, when I'm drawing right here at the edge of my page, I don't have to worry about making marks on the table. If a mark gets on my cutting mat, I don't care. So I can have things that go right, literally all the way up to the edge of the page, and not be concerned about it. Next, around the cliff area here, well, let's think about this land. Maybe first we're going to put a little path in, like there's a path that comes up towards that door. Now to do that, the path is going to be really narrow up here at the door, but down here where it's close to us, it's going to be wider. So maybe I'll mark how wide the path is going to be here, and as it gets closer to the door, it's going to shrink and shrink. But I don't want it to be a straight path. I want it to kind of follow the curvature of the land here, so it's going to kind of curve across and then up, and then this side is going to curve. See how it's getting closer and closer and closer. Boom. Now, doesn't it look like you could actually like walk down that path towards the door? Absolutely. And then maybe some grass. So like maybe there's going to be some grass along this cliff edge. Now for grass, I always start at the bottom and flick up, flick up, flick up, flick up. This is going to be tall grass because it's uncut. It's not like this is a place where people go mow the grass. And it's going to be, you know, getting plenty of water from the sea. So this is going to be like really tall grass. Now, right there, it's like just right at the edge. I want to bring it a little closer too. So it's like it's, you know, wrapping around the tree house. That's not a tree house. That's a lighthouse. So it's wrapping around the lighthouse with this grassy area. And so I've got these lines overlapping each other. That does make it quite dark with all those lines overlapping each other. If it's too dark, I can go back in and add highlights later after I've colored everything. I can use a white gel pen to add highlights later if needed. Okay, so that looks like, this patch of grass that wraps all the way around the lighthouse. Maybe there's going to be a little bit more coming this way, and maybe there's going to be a little empty spot and then some more over here. I don't know. You figure out how you want to do yours. I'm going to have just little sparse little bits coming off this way. I'm going to have like an empty little spot, and then some more over here that's going to go all the way to the edge. And one of the tricks with your grass is don't make it completely straight. If you get a flick, then some of them will be kind of straight, but some of them will be curved this way, some of them will curve that way. And if you just give lots of flicks, that really gets that grassy texture in. Next, maybe in this area up here, I want it to be, and down here, maybe some rocky dirt kind of. Notice how I'm making little itty-bitty scribbles and spreading them out. And it kind of makes it look a little darker, but also a little speckled, right? It's not just blank, plain, completely white. Maybe a couple of dots thrown in there. And then the same thing over here. Scribble things in, little dots, little specks. And again, we want this to be kind of light because, especially, it's going to depend on where the light source is. I've been assuming this whole time that the light is going to be coming from the lighthouse. If you're doing your picture during the day, boom, it might be really bright on the land, it might be really bright on the water. If you're doing your picture at night, where it's, like maybe just the moon and some stars showing, then everything is going to be darker. So, it really depends on where your source of light is coming from and how strong that source of light is. But there, notice how my land here just has little specklings and little scribbles. It's not anything precise, just enough to get the idea that there's some grass or dirt there or rocks. Moving up to the actual light of the lighthouse. Now what I don't want to do, I don't want to darken in the light. A lot of times I see kids, like if you're drawing stars and a moon, I'll see kids make black dots wherever they want the stars to be. And it's like, no, stars are white, not black. Like it's the opposite. So I want to think about that. When I make my light shining out of my lighthouse, I want to maybe do the outline dark, but not darken it in. So like I'm just going to make the indication of it's going to be like a cone. It's going to be, you'll see. Flick out that away, flick out that away. And you see how that kind of, and I can add a couple of, and so like this area here, you see how it's like a cone coming out from here? That's where the light is going to be. Now, the rest of the sky, I need to determine, well, what time of day is it? What's in the sky? All that kind of stuff. Maybe it's just some birds. Maybe it's daytime and there's some birds. Maybe it's nighttime and there's just clouds and moon and stars. Maybe it's daytime and there's clouds. Maybe it's stormy. You figure it out. I am just going to do some birds over here. I guess I'm going to do it like it's daytime. Okay, now is there anything else I need to do with my pen before I move on and start adding color? The answer to that is absolutely. Look at the difference between this land area, the water area, how three-dimensional they look, and then this lighthouse just looks very flat. So I need to consider where the light's shining from again. Now, if I'm assuming that this is going to be the brightest light, then even though it's shining that way, there's going to be some of that light that gets reflected this direction. So this side of the lighthouse is going to be the brightest. This side is going to be in shadow over here. So how do I make it look that way? Well, with hatching. Little parallel lines that go all the way down this side of the lighthouse. Now notice how small these lines are. They're really short lines. They don't go all the way across. They're just on this side, darkening that side of the lighthouse up. Maybe that shadow does need to extend a little farther, so I can do slightly longer lines. And it's a good idea to do this in layers, because especially when you have something that's a cylinder in shape, you don't want it to just be white on one side and black on the other. You want it to have a range of grays in between. So I'm kind of doing extra lines to get extra values, different types of values, from white to medium to dark to really dark. That way, that whole range of value makes it look more round, more three-dimensional. If you just have bright white and dark black, it's gonna still look kind of flat. Okay, now if hatching isn't enough, I can also do cross-hatching. I can do lines that go the other way, lines that go up and down, like that. There you go. I think that's pretty good for that part, but let's take a look at the rest of these other areas, the top and the sort of entry area. Now with the entry area, we got to think about the fact that this little rooftop is going to cast a shadow underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and just darken up this whole area underneath it. And I also got to consider the direction that shadow is going to go. The light is reflecting this direction, then that shadow is going to extend this direction a little bit. Okay? From here, angling away from the light. And then these two pillars you've got to think about as cylinders, just like this lighthouse is a cylinder. So here's a pillar, and it's going to have a shadow along one side. Here's a pillar, and it's going to have a shadow along one side. Just did that with little tiny dots. Whew, this is starting to come along. I still have the top up here that needs its shadowed areas. So on this top roof here, some of this light again is going to reflect that direction. So this side is going to be lit and this side is going to be in shadow. So I'm going to do some cross hatching in here. And this main area, I'm going to leave the windows perfectly bright white. Maybe I'll color them yellow when I color them, but they are going to be, there's a light inside this. This is a lighthouse and these are windows, so it's going to be bright inside of there. But this area around it, around the windows, is going to be really dark on this side, light on that side, just like everything else. So I'm going to do some more hatching. And let's do it cross-hatching in the areas where I want it to be darker. There. There. At this point, I am done with a pen. So now we're ready to move on and color. Now, I'm using Copic sketch markers. These are really expensive. There are lots of different brands of alcohol-based markers. And depending on which brand you use, some of this might be a little different. But for starters, let's take a look at the anatomy of one of these markers. So you notice that it has a cap on both ends, and that it shows you on both ends what color the marker is going to be. Now, on this end, we have a chisel tip. Most different brands of alcohol markers will have a chisel tip on one end. On the other end, we see a stripe, and we see a brush tip. Now, a brush tip, notice how it's bendy, okay, like a paintbrush. Now, the Copic sketch markers have that brush tip. They call it a super brush. A lot of brands of alcohol markers will have the chisel on one end, and then the other side, instead of being a brush tip, it will be what's called a bullet tip, where it's pointy, but it's not bendy like this one. So you got to keep that in mind. Your markers might be different from mine. As a matter of fact, the ones that I use in my classroom, instead of having a brush, they have a bullet tip on the other end. So, for this picture, I'm just going to use nothing but the chisel end for everything. Simply because, well, the brush tip is better for blending colors, and it's better than the chisel for getting into small corners, but I know that just about every brand that you might be using is going to have a chisel tip, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the chisel tip. Now, before we start, notice that I've got something under my paper. That's super important. With these markers, they will bleed through the paper, and also the type of paper that you use is very important. If I use a cardstock like I have here, then I can get a lot more ink before it bleeds through. If I use something like this marker pad, this has very, very, very thin paper. See, it's almost like tracing paper. You can see through it. It's a very different texture from tracing paper. It's very, very smooth. But with this kind of paper, it instantly bleeds all the way through to the other side. And I don't recommend using these markers with any other kind of paper except marker papers or cardstock. Well, I can get into reasons for that, but that would take a while to explain. But whichever one you're using, you want to have something underneath. Now, it's best to, you could put an extra sheet of paper underneath your drawing, but it's actually better to have something that's non-absorbent, something that's more plasticky. Anyway, I could go on and on, but the mat underneath is super important. Now, I personally, in my own personal collection, have about 100 different colors to choose from. So, in my case, I like to pick out all of my colors in advance. But if you're doing this in a classroom where you're sharing colors with other people, you don't get to grab a whole pile of colors and say, these are my colors, I'm using them, you get your own. No. When you're doing this in a classroom setting, you have to share. You know, where I take one marker at a time, I use this one, and let other people use these other colors while I'm waiting. Yeah, that kind of sharing. And when we're ready to color, we're going to start with something called base colors. Base colors mean I'm going to say, well, what color is the light? It's yellow. I'm going to color it yellow. What color is the sky? It's blue. I'm going to color it blue. What color is the water? It's kind of blue-green, so I'm going to color it blue-green. I'm not going to worry about mixing colors. I'm not going to worry about highlights and shadows. I'm not going to worry about anything else except just local color or base color. So, for example, let's color that light yellow. Notice that with my chisel tip, I am letting the flat end of it rest against the page so I can fill in a whole area with a solid color. If I were using just the tip, it wouldn't fill very much. Using the flat edge, that's what makes the chisel tip useful. Now, as an example of what I was just talking about, your chisel tip can be used in several different directions. If I lay the flat edge, I get nice wide strokes. If I lay just the tip and I run it this way, I get narrow strokes. If I run it this way, I get even narrower strokes. Alright, so I got my yellow light shining. Next, I think I'm going to work on the stripes of my Lighthouse. So I'm going to alternate. I'm going to do red, then white, then red, then white, then red, then white, then red, then white. Okay, so notice how I've turned this at the sharp angle, the pointy side going down, so that I can get into that smaller area without going over the edges. Okay, and I can turn it and go this way. I don't have to keep my paper straight. Notice how I'm turning my paper so I can get into the edges and corners. Yeah. And you can see how with this stripe here, part of it's in the light and part of it's in the dark. I'm going to color in this whole stripe all the way from one side to the other, even though I'm coloring here over top of some of my hatching and cross-hatching. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what we want. Now, we'll talk in a little while about how to blend colors. Right now I'm just getting the base color or the local color, but eventually some of that yellow color from the light is going to be reflected onto here, and I'll add some yellow to that later. You'll see how that works after I get all these base colors in place. There. Maybe the roof is also going to be red, and then this section here is going to be white. So I'll use my red one more time right up here in this top section. Oops, I forgot a spot. This red stripe should overlap behind this and come out the other side. Let's make sure we get that in there. Red, right here we go. Okay. Alright. Next, I'll move down to the water and use my blue-green. Now, with things like water, it's very important that we think about the directional aspect of the water. Notice that my water, the waves go horizontal, so I don't want to color up and down. I want to color side to side. If it's not comfortable, like for me, coloring side to side right here is uncomfortable. It's a lot easier for me to color up and down. So what I'm going to do is rotate my paper so that I can color up and down. And that way it doesn't hurt my arm as much, doesn't hurt my wrist as much. And if you've got something under your paper like this, don't be afraid to get all the way to the edge of the page. Notice how I'm going really slow right here up against the edge of the cliff, because I don't want to go over the cliff, and I'm going to go really slow up here across the horizon because I don't want it to blend into the sky. There we go. But then for the rest of this I can go much, much faster. Okay, next I think I'm going to switch to a sort of rocky color. This is a grayish, this is a warm gray, and I'm going to color in this cliff edge, and maybe some of my dirt or rock, this area up here, maybe not, we'll see. As a matter of fact, I think I'm just going to start with this dirt area with a sort of brown, and maybe I'll come back and add some of that gray to it later, but for now I'll start with just a brown. Now, this area here, instead of coloring like side to side or up and down, maybe I'll color in circles to try to get that sort of, scribbly, rounded texture. And if your marker's starting to dry out, well, that's one of the reasons I like the Copic sketch. Other brands don't do this, but Copic sketch has ink refills that I can fill up this marker with and make it work again. And now that I've refilled this, it should be working much better. Yes, very nice. Awesome. Now, if you're using a different brand and it starts to dry out, my recommendation is to use it until it's completely dry. With the Copics, don't use it till it's completely dry, because if it gets completely dry, then you might have to replace the nib as well. But if the nib stays moist and then you fill it up with ink, it'll be perfect. But with other brands that aren't refillable, use it as much as you can. Get every last drop of ink out of it before you throw it away. Now, notice how I colored the dirt area up to the edge of the cliff. I did not color the grass. The grass is just black lines right now. I am going to color the sky behind that grass. But before we get to the sky, I'm going to do the path. And I think I'm going to use some of this gray in this area here. I think these two pillars are going to be white, but this area behind and around the door, behind the pillars and around the door, I'm going to make that area gray. And this roofy area too. Make that gray. And that also makes the door stand out. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to do a red door. Yeah. Sweet. Nice. Now for the blue sky, let's see, I'm going to turn my paper so I can go this way and get right up to the edge. Now again, just like with the water, we want to kind of stay horizontal with our motions as much as possible in the sky. Now I find at the edge of the page, when I'm getting all the way to the edge, it's easiest to pull towards the edge. If I try to go the other way, like back on, then a lot of times it catches on the lip of the paper, and that can actually damage the tip of the marker if you do it that way. But going off the edge like this, start on the paper and move off, then you won't hurt the marker that way. And again, don't be afraid to turn your paper as needed, and when you are running up against an edge, take your time, do it slow. You can be faster in other areas, but up against an edge, take your time and be slow. And as I'm finishing up here with the sky, I've recognized that I missed something earlier when I was using my yellow. I want these windows to be bright yellow, so let me swap real quick, grab that, do that, and then I think I'm done with my base colors once I've done that. I'll need to do a little once over just to make sure everything is the right base color, but looks like it. The sky is blue, the light is yellow, the lighthouse is red and white stripes. Yeah, I got everything the base colors. Now, when you're done with the base colors, the next thing is to think about blending and mixing some colors. And this is the reason why we're using alcohol-based inks, because alcohol markers can blend together on your paper. Let's check that out. So, in this dirt area, I want to use my warm gray to make some rocky areas, and I think I'm going to use some of these little I can't talk, squiggles, some of these little squiggles, as little indications of where some rocky, bumpy shapes might be. So, not all of them, but in some of them, I'm just kind of being bajankety with my color here, especially around the edge there. Just giving the indication that there's some little bumpy, rocky things in the land there, in the ground. With regular markers, you can't put a lighter color on top of a darker color. It doesn't work. But with alcohol-based inks, I can take this yellow and think, okay, my light is yellow, so there's going to be highlights that are going to be shining onto stuff. So I can use this yellow to lighten up, brighten up the edge of this ground here. And you see how that blends with the brown to make that a lighter yellowish brown than the stuff around it. Okay, and I can do that along the edge of this and the rooftop. So let's start with the rooftop here. It will make the top of this roof, the edge of this roof, a little bit orangey because it's going to mix with the red that's already there. Okay, now it might take a couple of passes. I might have to go over it a couple of times, but you can start to see how it's pushing the red out of the way and mixing with the red that's underneath it to make it that bright orangey. Okay, I'm going to do that all along the side here. Even in the water here, I think I'll do some reflections, So let's grab that yellow, and maybe on some of these wave tops. I can also come in and darken some areas under some of the waves, maybe, with a blue. Just a blue. And this is actually a darker blue than the one I used in the sky. But you can see how this creates a texture to that water where the waves have the light shining on the top of the wave and then a shadow under the wave. And it makes them look like they're rolling towards us. And don't forget the ones that go behind the cliff. They are just as important. So I'm actually going to go back and add a yellow highlight on top of some of those. I also think I'm going to come into here with a darker brown. This is actually a darker brown than the one I used for the dirt there. But I'm going to make this shadow underneath here a little darker, like that. Oh, is there anything else I need to do to this? I might just be finished. Maybe I should add some green. I think I will. So I've just got a green here, and I think what I'm going to do, just flicking it, just the same way that I flicked the pen. And I'm not terribly concerned about being literally right on top of my pen lines. I'm more concerned about just getting that flick motion to get that texture of the grass. And it'll just mix with everything under it to give us that green grassy look. Boom! I think this is done. I think this is awesome. I think all that's left is to sign my name. So I'm going to get back out my pen that I used a long time ago to draw this, and I guess I'll sign my name down here on the path. So there you have it. Now we are finished with our lighthouse seascape drawing, and I think this turned out pretty darn wonderful. If you enjoyed learning how to draw this with the hatching, the cross-hatching, flicking to make the texture of the grass, horizontal texture in the water, scribbly texture in the dirt and the rocks, if you enjoyed learning all of that and how to do all of that, if you enjoyed learning how to use these alcohol-based markers, like the video, leave a comment down in the description below, let me know what you think. And if you didn't like it, let me know that too. I'd love to know what you feel either way. If you want more videos like this, more tutorials on how to draw simple little pictures like this, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of my future videos. Don't forget to click that notification bell. And that's all for today. See you next time.